Angola, Angola, officially the Republic of Angola, is a country in southern Africa. It is the seventh largest country in Africa, and is bordered by Namibia to the south, the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the north, Zambia to the east, and the Atlantic Ocean to west. The exclave province of Cabinda has borders with the Republic of the Congo and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The capital and largest city is Luanda. Although its territory has been inhabited since the Paleolithic era, modern Angola originates in Portuguese colonization, which began with, and was for centuries limited to, coastal settlements and trading posts established from the 16th century onwards. In the 19th century, European settlers slowly and hesitantly began to establish themselves in the interior. As a Portuguese colony, Angola did not encompass its present borders until the early 20th century. Following resistance by groups such as the Kwamato, the Kwanyama and the Mbunda, independence was achieved in 1975 after a protracted liberation war. That same year, Angola descended into an intense civil war that lasted until 2002. It has since become a relatively stable unitary presidential republic. In spite of this, the standard of living remains low for the majority of the population, and life expectancy and infant mortality rates in Angola are among the worst in the world. Angola's economic growth is highly uneven, with the majority of the nation's wealth concentrated in a disproportionately small sector of the population. Angola is a member state of the United Nations, OPEC, African Union, the Community of Portuguese-language countries, the Latin Union and the Southern African Development Community. A highly multi-ethnic country, Angola's 24.3 million people span various tribal groups, customs, and traditions. Angolan culture reflects centuries of Portuguese rule, namely in the predominance of the Portuguese language and Roman Catholicism, combined with diverse indigenous influences. Etymology: the name Angola comes from the Portuguese colonial name Reino de Angola, appearing as early as Dias de Novaes' 1571 charter. The toponym was derived by the Portuguese from the title Gola held by the kings of Ndongo. Ndongo was a kingdom in the highlands, between the Kwanza and Lukala rivers, nominally tributary to the King of Congo but which was seeking greater independence during the 16th century. History: early migrations and political units. Goy and San hunter-gatherers are the earliest known modern human inhabitants of the area. They were largely absorbed or replaced by Bantu peoples during the Bantu migrations, though small numbers remain in parts of southern Angola to the present day. The Bantu came from the north, probably from somewhere near the present-day Republic of Cameroon. During this time, the Bantu established a number of political units in most parts of what today is Angola. The best known of these is the Kingdom of the Congo that had its center in the northwest of contemporary Angola, but included important regions in the west to present-day Democratic Republic and Republic of Congo and in southern Gabon. It established trade routes with other trading cities and civilizations up and down the coast of southwestern and West Africa and even with the Great Zimbabwe Mutapa Empire, but engaged in little or no transoceanic trade. To its south lay the Kingdom of Ndongo, from which the area of the later Portuguese colony was sometimes known as Dongo. Portuguese colonization. The region now known as Angola was reached by the Portuguese explorer Diogo Cao in 1484. The year before, the Portuguese had established relations with the Kingdom of Congo, which stretched at the time from modern Gabon in the north to the Kwanza River in the south. The Portuguese established their principal early trading post at Soyo, which now forms the northernmost city in Angola apart from the Cabinda enclave. Paulo Dias de Novaes founded São Paulo de Loanda in 1575 with 100 families of settlers and 400 soldiers. Anguilla was fortified in 1587 and elevated to a township in 1617. The Portuguese established several settlements, forts, and trading posts along the Angolan coast. principally trading in Angolan slaves for Brazilian plantations. Local slave dealers provided a large number of slaves for the Portuguese Empire, usually sold in exchange for manufactured goods from Europe. This part of the Atlantic slave trade continued until after Brazil's independence in the 1820s. Despite Portugal's nominal claims, as late as the 19th century, the control over the interior country of Angola was minimal, but the 16th century saw them gain control of the coast through a series of treaties and wars. Life for European colonists was difficult and progress slow. Iliff notes that Portuguese records of Angola from the 16th century show that a great famine occurred on average every 70 years, accompanied by epidemic disease. It might kill one-third or one-half of the population, destroying the demographic growth of a generation and forcing colonists back into the river valleys. Amid the Portuguese Restoration War, the Dutch occupied Luanda in 1641, using alliances with local peoples against Portuguese holdings elsewhere. A fleet under Salvador de Sari took Luanda for Portugal in 1648. Reconquest of the rest of the territory was completed by 1650. New treaties with Congo were signed in 1649, others with Jinga's Kingdom of Matamba and Ndongo followed in 1656. The conquest of Pungo and Ndongo in 1671 was the last major Portuguese expansion from Luanda, as attempts to invade Congo in 1670 and Matamba in 1681 failed. Portugal also expanded inward from Benguela, but until the late 19th century the inroads from Luanda and Benguela were very limited. Portugal had neither the intention nor the means to carry out a large-scale territorial occupation and colonization. Development of the hinterland began after the Berlin Conference in 1885 fixed the colony's borders, and British and Portuguese investment fostered mining, railways, and agriculture based on various forced labor and voluntary labor systems. Full Portuguese administrative control of the hinterland did not establish itself until the beginning of the 20th century. Portugal had a minimalist presence in Angola for nearly 500 years, and early calls for independence provoked little reaction amongst the population, who had no social identity related to the territory as a whole. More overtly political and nationalist organizations first appeared in the 1950s and began to make demands for self-determination, especially in international forums such as the Non-Aligned Movement. The Portuguese regime, meanwhile, refused to accede to the demands for independence, provoking an armed conflict that started in 1961 when freedom fighters attacked both white and black civilians in cross-border operations in northeastern Angola. The war came to be known as the Colonial War. In this struggle, the principal protagonists included the People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, founded in 1956, the National Front for the Liberation of Angola, which appeared in 1961, and the National Union for the Total Independence of Angola, founded in 1966. After many years of conflicts that led to the weakening of all the insurgent parties, Angola gained its independence on the 11th of November 1975. After the 1974 coup d'état in Lisbon, Portugal, which overthrew the Portuguese regime headed by Marcelo Caetano, Portugal's new revolutionary leaders began in 1974 a process of political change at home and accepted independence for its former colonies abroad. In Angola, a fight for dominance broke out immediately between the three nationalist movements. The events prompted a mass exodus of Portuguese citizens, creating up to 300,000 destitute Portuguese refugees, the Retornados. The new Portuguese government tried to mediate an understanding between the three competing movements, and succeeded in getting them to agree, on paper, to form a common government. But in the end none of the African parties respected the commitments made, and military force resolved the issue. independence and civil war. After it gained independence in November 1975, Angola experienced a devastating civil war which lasted several decades. It claimed millions of lives and produced many refugees. It came to an end only in 2002. Following negotiations held in Portugal, itself experiencing severe social and political turmoil and uncertainty due to the April 1974 revolution, Angola's three main guerrilla groups agreed to establish a transitional government in January 1975. Within 2 months, however, the FNLA, MPLA and UNITA had started fighting each other and the country began splitting into zones controlled by rival armed political groups. The MPLA gained control of the capital Luanda and much of the rest of the country. With the support of the United States, Zaire and South Africa intervened militarily in favor of the FNLA and UNITA with the intention of taking Luanda before the declaration of independence. In response, Cuba intervened in favor of the MPLA, which became a flashpoint for the Cold War. With Cuban support, the MPLA held Luanda and declared independence on the 11th of November 1975, with Agostinho Neto becoming the first president. Though the civil war continued. At this time, most of the 500,000 Portuguese who lived in Angola, and who had accounted for the majority of the skilled work in the public administration, agriculture, industries and trade, fled the country, leaving its once prosperous and growing economy in a state of bankruptcy. For most of 1975 to 1990, the MPLA organized and maintained a socialist regime. In 1990, when the Cold War ended, MPLA abandoned its ties to the Marxist-Leninist ideology and declared social democracy to be its official ideology, going on to win the 1992 general election. However, 8 opposition parties rejected the elections as rigged, sparking the Halloween massacre. Ceasefire with UNITA. On the 22nd of March 2002, Jonas Savimbi, the leader of UNITA, was killed in combat with government troops. A ceasefire was reached by the two factions shortly afterwards. UNITA gave up its armed wing and assumed the role of major opposition party, although in the knowledge that in the present regime a legitimate democratic election was impossible. Although the political situation of the country began to stabilize, regular democratic processes were not established before the elections in Angola in 2008 and 2012 and the adoption of a new constitution of Angola in 2010. All of which strengthened the prevailing dominant party system. MPLA head officials continue, e.g., to be given senior positions in top-level companies or other fields, although a few outstanding UNITA figures are given some shares in the economic as well as in the military share. Among Angola's major problems are a serious humanitarian crisis, the abundance of minefields, the continuation of the political, and to a much lesser degree, military activities in favor of the independence of the northern exclave of Cabinda, carried out in the context of the protracted Cabinda conflict by the Frente para a Libertação do Enclave de Cabinda, but most of all, the dilapidation of the country's rich mineral resources by the regime. While most of the internally displaced have now settled around the capital, in the so-called Musaqués, the general situation for Angolans remains desperate. Geography. At 1,246,620 square kilometers, Angola is the world's 23rd largest country. It is comparable in size to Mali, or twice the size of France or Texas. It lies mostly between latitudes 4 degrees and 18 degrees south, and longitudes 12 degrees and 24 degrees east. Angola is bordered by Namibia to the south, Zambia to the east, the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the northeast, and the South Atlantic Ocean to the west. The coastal exclave of Cabinda in the north borders the Republic of the Congo to the north, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the south. Angola's capital, Luanda, lies on the Atlantic coast in the northwest of the country. Climate. Angola has 3 seasons: a dry season which lasts from May to October, a transitional season with some rain from November to January, and a hot, rainy season from February to April. April is the wettest month. Angola's average temperature on the coast is 16 degrees Celsius in the winter and 21 degrees Celsius in the summer, while the interior is generally hotter and drier. Politics. Angola's motto is Virtus Unita Fortior, a Latin phrase meaning, virtue is stronger when united. The Angolan government is composed of 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The executive branch of the government is composed of the president, the vice-presidents, and the council of ministers. The legislative branch comprises a 220-seat unicameral legislature elected from both provincial and nationwide constituencies. For decades, political power has been concentrated in the presidency. The Constitution of 2010 establishes the broad outlines of government structure and delineates the rights and duties of citizens. The legal system is based on Portuguese and customary law but is weak and fragmented, and courts operate in only 12 of more than 140 municipalities. A Supreme Court serves as the appellate tribunal. A constitutional court holds the powers of judicial review. Governors of the 18 provinces are appointed by the president. After the end of the Civil War, the regime came under pressure from within as well as from the international community to become more democratic and less authoritarian. Its reaction was to implement a number of changes without substantially changing its character. Angola is classified as not free by Freedom House in the Freedom in the World 2014 report. The report noted that the August 2012 parliamentary elections, in which the ruling Popular Movement for the Liberation of Angola won more than 70% of the vote, suffered from serious flaws, including outdated and inaccurate voter rolls. Voter turnout dropped from 80% in 2008 to 60%. Angola scored poorly on the 2013 Ibrahim Index of African Governance. It was ranked 39 out of 52 sub-Saharan African countries, scoring particularly badly in the areas of participation and human rights, sustainable economic opportunity, and human development. The Ibrahim Index uses a number of variables to compile its list, which reflects the state of governance in Africa. The new constitution, adopted in 2010, further sharpened the authoritarian character of the regime. In the future, there will be no presidential elections. The president and the vice president of the political party which wins the parliamentary elections automatically become president and vice president of Angola. Through a variety of mechanisms, the state president controls all the other organs of the state, so that separation of powers is not maintained. As a consequence, Angola no longer has a presidential system in the sense of the systems existing, e.g., in the USA or in France. In terms of the classifications used in constitutional law, its regime is considered one of several authoritarian regimes in Africa. On 16 October 2014, Angola was elected for the second time as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, with 190 favorable votes out of 193. The mandate begins on 1 January 2015 and lasts for 2 years. Also in that month, the country took on the leadership of the group of African ministers and governors at the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, following the debates at the annual meetings of both entities. Since January 2014, the Republic of Angola has held the presidency of the International Conference on the Great Lakes region. In 2015, the Executive Secretary of ICGLR, Ntumba Luebe, said that Angola is the example to be followed by members of the organization, because of the significant progress made over the 12 years of peace, particularly in terms of socio-economic and political military stability. Military. The Angolan Armed Forces is headed by a Chief of Staff who reports to the Minister of Defense. There are 3 divisions: the Army, Navy, and National Air Force. Total manpower is about 110,000. Its equipment includes Russian-manufactured fighters, bombers, and transport planes. There are also Brazilian-made EMB-312 Tucano for training role, Czech-made L-39 for training and bombing role, Czech Zeppelin for training role, and a variety of Western-made aircraft such as C-212, Aviocar, Sud Aviation Alouette 3, etc. A small number of AAF personnel are stationed in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Republic of the Congo. Police. The national police departments are public order, criminal investigation, traffic in transport, investigation and inspection of economic activities, taxation and frontier supervision, riot police and the rapid intervention police. The National Police are in the process of standing up an air wing, which will provide helicopter support for operations. The National Police are developing their criminal investigation and forensic capabilities. The force has an estimated 6,000 patrol officers, 2,500 taxation and frontier supervision officers, 182 criminal investigators and 100 financial crimes detectives and around 90 economic activity inspectors. The National Police have implemented a modernization and development plan to increase the capabilities and efficiency of the total force. In addition to administrative reorganization, modernization projects include procurement of new vehicles, aircraft and equipment, construction of new police stations and forensic laboratories, restructured training programs and the replacement of AKM rifles with 9mm Uzis for officers in urban areas. Justice. In 2014, a new penal code is expected to take effect in Angola. The classification of the money laundering crime is one of the novelties in the new legislation.